Welcome back to Cloud 42, I'm James. We are in the middle of a variable speed upgrade for my Grizzly G0602 lathe. In the last video, we got the motor installed with great difficulty into the back of the lathe. And this week we're going to go back to the electronics. We're going to get all of the electronics that we've already tested put into a box so that they'll be protected when they're installed on the lathe. Let's go over to the bench, let me grab the box, and let's get started. This is what's called a CHKO series Hammond enclosure. It's also referred to as a NEMA Type 1 enclosure. This one is 12 inches by 12 inches by 6 inches deep. And this is just about the right size to hold the VFD, the contactor, got the noise filter down in the bottom, a fan to force air through here after we cut some holes for ventilation, and a small wall wart power supply that we'll mount in here someplace to provide power for the fan and 12 volt power to go out for the fan on the lathe itself. So I have started by just kind of laying everything in here about where I think it'll go. I think this gives us plenty of room for the VFD with space around it for air to flow through. There's plenty of room for the contactor, room to route the wires. We'll have control wiring coming in through the bottom up to the control connections here. We'll have the motor lead coming in the bottom, in the back towards the bottom of the enclosure, and have that come into the power leads. Power will feed in on this side, and then probably we'll be feeding in the controls for the AC contactor up higher in the box. And so I think that keeps everything separated, gives us plenty of room to route. Now we just need to mark up the box and make some holes and some mounting points. So I have already marked screw locations in the bottom of the box here. And I just traced around the edges of these. So I've got marks here, 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 and here to mount the VFD. I've got 2 marks for the DIN rail that the contactor snaps onto, so that'll fit. And I've marked the holes down here for the filter to mount as well. Then for the fan to mount on the bottom, I've laid the fan about where it's going to fit, and I've marked the 4 mounting holes and a line around the area that I need to actually cut out for the fan. And so this is where the air is going to draw in through the bottom. And then I don't really want to put the outlet on the top of the box, because if I do that, then that's a horizontal surface that's going to collect dust and debris right on the fan grill, and I don't want any of that to get in. So I think I'm going to put the exhaust for the fan on the front. And to do this, I'm using filters, and these are just, commonly available on eBay. They're designed to go on computer cases to filter out dust. So it's just a grill that goes over the fan, and then there's a sheet of filter media and a cover that snaps over that. So we just need to mount one of these on the bottom over the outside of the motor to keep it from sucking dust in, and then we'll mount another one on the side and cut a hole underneath it to give the warm air someplace to go. Want to do that someplace at the top of the box, because that's where all the hot air is going, both because it's going to rise and because the VFD has its exhaust ports on the top. So because this has the same layout as the fan, it's pretty easy to just position this where it needs to go and use it as a template to mark the holes. And I, of course, want this to be square and about centered in the box, maybe down about 3/4 of an inch from the top so we don't run into anything on the inside. And then I'm going to tape it down. Make sure we're still lined up more or less close enough. And then I'm just going to use a fine point Sharpie to mark all the locations. So I'll mark circles where the holes are. And then I'll go around the outside of this and mark approximately where the opening needs to be cut for airflow. I guess I have this taped down, so I don't really need to be holding it, but okay. Now I can come back with the square and connect the lines. Okay, so then we'll need to drill holes for the corners and cut out the large opening in the center. Now for the holes, I'm going to start those with center punch marks just so the drill won't wander. Hopefully this will be enough to keep them centered. This stuff is pretty tough, the steel that these are made out of, and it's pretty easy for the drill to skate all over the place. So hopefully these will be enough to keep it centered. Okay, so we'll just use, for most of these holes, we'll use M4 screws. Those will fit through the holes in the fan easily, and they'll fit through the holes in the fan grill easily. And this steel is tough enough and thick enough that I can just drill these tap size and then actually just tap the steel. And we can do the same thing on the bottom here. For the fan holes in the bottom, because we have to go all the way through for the fan, we'll drill these out a little bit larger and we'll use normal fan screws on those. Now for the cable entries and exits on the side, we're going to use cable glands. So this is a cable gland. It's got a threaded end and a nut, so we'll make a hole big enough for this to fit in, and then the nut goes on the inside. Then inside the back of it, there's a little rubber ring and some little fingers, and it makes a compression fitting. So if I grab a piece of cable here, the cable goes through that ring easily, and then when you tighten it down, it grips onto the cable and actually seals around it. So you get, you know, probably not a watertight seal, but certainly nothing is going to get in there. Dust is not going to get in there. And it also provides strain relief for the cable. Now, for the power cable, for this 12-3 cable that we're going to use, the rubber gasket or the rubber grommet that's in here will grip that just fine. But for smaller cables, this rubber ring is not going to collapse down enough to grip the cable securely or to seal around it. So I actually 3D printed some replacements for some of the cables. So I've got one relatively small cable. Grab a sample here. And so I made a grommet. These are printed, 3D printed out of TPE, thermoplastic elastomer material, so they're flexible. So the cable goes through this easily, and then that fits into the back here around the cable, and then the nut will squeeze it and it tightens down and seals around that. So I've got that one, and then I've got another one that's going to have a couple of different size cables going through it. So I made one of these that's got 2 openings in it. Kind of looks like a Mandelbrot set. Anyway, it's got 2 openings, one for the larger cable, one for the smaller, and then when this gets crunched down, it'll squeeze down on it and actually grip both of those cables. So we just have to drill some larger holes here, and I got a step drill bit that we'll use for that. So I think the next thing to do here is take this over to the drill press and knock some holes in it. Well, I've got the box over here on the drill press, and I apologize for the tight quarters. It's back in the corner of the shop, and getting the cameras in here was actually kind of complex, but we'll see what we can do here. So this drill is tapping size for M4, which is what we're trying to do, and I'm just going to go ahead and punch all the holes that I have marked here in the bottom, and hopefully we can get in here. I did have to take the drill depth. This is the depth stop that's normally clamped around the spindle. And I did have to take that out because the clamp was actually interfering with the side of the box. So let's get a little oil on this thing, and let's see if we can make some holes. have to take this handle off to get it to fit. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, I think that's all the holes on the inside of the box. Let me get it out of here. Now let me lower the table so we can do the holes in the top. Now I have a different handle in the way, so I'm going to take that one off too. Okay, now we need to go down even further so we can do the holes in the bottom of the box. Okay, now I'll bring in the bigger drill, the step drill. And this one we're going to run a lot slower. Okay, we're running about 200 RPM. Let's open up some of these holes. I need to go to the second to the top step on this. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this with a Sharpie. So the blue mark should not go into the part. Let's see how this goes. Okay, see if it fits. That's perfect. Okay. Three more. Hot and smoky. Okay, I think that is all the holes. Let me get this cleaned up a little bit. We'll go back over to the bench and we'll start figuring out how to cut these out. Okay, we need to cut out the opening here for the fan. There's lots of ways to do this job. I've seen people cover the face with tape to protect it and then try to come in with something like a jigsaw. I've tried that, at least with the saw that I have. The thin metal, the blades that I have, it's a mess. You might be able to come in here like with a 4.5-inch angle grinder with a cutoff wheel, or a death wheel as they're called, and cut this out. That's quite a lot. I think what I'm going to try here instead, I've used this with some success before, is a Dremel wheel. And these are the Dremel reinforced cutoff wheels, so they've got fiber in them. There are some that aren't reinforced that are basically a paper impregnated product. This is some kind of fiberglass. It's probably not carbon fiber, but some kind of fiberglass reinforced thing with some kind of woven fibers in it. And I just put those in the Dremel tool and we will just abrasively cut this out. And this is noisy and this is dusty, but it gets the job done. Unfortunately, the wheels also go away pretty fast. You know, this is a terribly messy job, and as you can see, and I'm starting to worry about my camera lenses here, so I think I'm gonna take this outside and I'll be back when it's done. Well, I got the job done, got the hole cut out here, and I've got the hole cut out here for the fan, but it is difficult for me to convey just how disappointed I am in the way these tools worked. So this is what's supposed to happen with these discs as you use them up. They become very, very small, and then you take them off and throw them away. However, this is what actually happened to several of them. And you can see that the hole in this is quite a lot larger. And what happened is the disc just got loose and just instantly ground its way through and popped off or popped loose on the arbor of the Dremel. And so I went through several of these wheels that I just barely got to use, and then they popped off. And you know, I've done this in a couple of boxes before. I did this for the cooling fans and for the control panel on the larger Hammond box for my CNC mill. And I just do not remember having this kind of problems. And maybe I'm just not remembering correctly, but I thought those went a lot better than this did. So I'm pretty disappointed. Ended up having to go back to the store and get more of these discs, and I'll probably look for another solution next time. In any case, we've got all the holes in this thing, and now we just need to tap all of these small holes. Before I tap them, I'm going to take this countersink and just put a little small chamfer and clean up the entrance side that I'm going to run the tap into. Don't want to go too deep because there's not really, you know, a lot of material here. Okay. Got my M4 tap and a cordless drill, and I'm just going to knock these in quickly. A little bit of oil, and let's see how this goes. Doesn't go very well if the chuck's not tight. And those are going beautifully. A little cleanup on a couple of those that raised a burr. And you do the same thing down here on the bottom. Now, for these, I want to space it up off the base with a couple little sticks here, just so I don't run into the bench. And same drill, pun intended. Okay, that is all the holes tapped. And it looks like I didn't break the tap. You know, I finished with all the holes before I commented on that. Okay, I think that's all the prep we have to do on the cabinet here, so let me clean this up and get ready to mount some components. Okay, I think we're ready to start mounting some things in here. Let's start with the DIN rail for the contactor. And grab some of the shortest M4 screws I have here. Well, that went pretty easily. And let's see here. Yep, works great. Now let's slide it off the end and we'll continue. Next, let's go ahead and drop the VFD in here. Now I've already got the filter down here. Let's go ahead and just anchor that first. Okay, that's the filter. Now let's get some washers and some slightly longer screws and mount the VFD in here. Just get those started loosely. Okay, that's in, that's in. We can get the contactor in. Okay, and the last thing it needs to go in is the fan. And the fan needs to go this way. I think I want to put a grill on the back of this thing first. Okay, so I'm going to put a grill on this, and the reason for the grill is not to keep fingers out of it. It's to keep any wires that are in here from falling into the fan and stopping it, because I would hate to have something simple happen and cause this thing to overheat. I think if it overheats, it'll just shut down, but we don't want to do that anyway. These are computer case fan screws. Very coarse thread, little screws just for this purpose. Okay, before I stick that in, let's take a look at the front here. Now, I was hoping this would work out, so that would line up in such a way that when it's on, it would be visible through the fan grill. And I think it's going to be. We'll have to see once this thing is on the wall. Let me go ahead and drop this on before I flip this over. And again, I'm just going to use the shortest little M4 screws I have. There that is. That's the back. Then the filter and the cover just snap over it. Beautiful. Now let's talk a moment about airflow. So the airflow is going to come through the fan in the bottom and then be sucked in through the bottom of the VFD, expelled out the top, and find its way out this vent. Now, there's a couple of ways I could have done this. I could have put the fan, well, there's not enough room to put it in front, but if I put the fan on the top, I could have had it exhausting. But if it's pushing air out, that's going to be trying to suck air in through all the other openings, around the door, around the cables, around any place else where there's a leak in this thing. But if instead I put it on the bottom like this, drawing the air in, then you have higher pressure in the cabinet that will ultimately force air out this vent in the top. But because you have positive pressure in here, the air is going to be trying to find its way out through all the cracks, and it won't be carrying dust in. If you had it sucking air in through all the cracks and all the leaks in the case and all the little places where light can get through around the knockouts, you'd be sucking dust into this. But because the fan's going to be drawing in the bottom through a dust filter, that air is going to be filtered as it comes in and then forced out, and the whole inside of the cabinet is going to stay a lot cleaner, because this shop is a dirty environment. One moment, let me grab the other fan grill. Okay, so when I put the grill in the bottom, I'm going to use the same fan screws. There are these ones happen to be black, but they fit nice and neat into the hole, and they'll go through and engage the fan. So I'll start with one. Do that loosely and then put in the other four, or the other three. There we go, one fan on the bottom, and let's just slap a filter over that. Okay, so now we have a fan set to draw air in the bottom to ventilate the cabinet, and the excess air comes up comes out through here. Okay, at this point, all we need to do now is connect a bunch of additional wiring. Let's start by bringing in the service line cord. Now, this is the gland, and I've already got this on the cord, and I've already stripped it and put some, terminated with some crimp-on connectors. So let's go ahead and route this through the bottom of the box here, through one of the large holes we cut, and put the nut on it. Tighten that down, and then I'm going to give it a little gronk from the outside. There, that is not going anywhere. So we've got hot and neutral, and I'm going to bring those to neutral and hot up here on the contactor. Get my head down here where I can see what's going on. Now I need a screwdriver. Okay, now the ground, we're going to loop around, and this point on the chassis is going to become our star ground. So there's going to be a ground coming off of that, going over to the filter, and one coming off of that and going over to the VFD. And let's go ahead and hook those up now. So I've got 2 of these prepared. And let's just see if we can get them down here and get through the screw through all of those. Okay, there's our star ground. Good and tight, nothing's moving. Contactor back down. Okay, now let's go ahead and hook that up to the filter here. Okay, that's the ground firmly attached. Now before we put the hot and neutral onto the input of the filter here, we also need to tap off power for one other thing, and that is this power adapter. We're going to mount it over here, and we need to get AC power off of the filter input and bring it over here. And the way I'm going to do that, don't tell anybody, but if you take these little spade connector terminals, the little crimp-on ones, and spread them just a little bit, you can get them to crimp onto the blade of a plug like this. And so I'll crimp a couple of wires in this, and then I will put some heat shrink down over that. And there we go. Risk of electrocution eliminated. Now I want to stick this on the side right here where it won't interfere with the latch and where the little LED is going to be visible. And I thought about getting really complicated with a bunch of stuff, but decided I've got this 3M extreme mounting tape, and this stuff is stout. It should be more than enough for this task. So this should easily stick right here to get it, again, just low enough that it's not going to interfere with anything, but high enough that I can easily see that little green light. Oh yeah, I can pick the whole box up by that. And then we'll cut and route this to the appropriate place. It'll be coming up here later. Let's take these, put ring terminals on the other end, and route these over here. Okay, so let's start with the line because it'll be on the bottom here. Got a wire for that. And then I'll bring this and put on it. The output of the contactor, tighten that down later. And let me grab my white wire and do the same thing. And there we go, everything's nice and solid. Okay, now the ground wire here onto the VFD. And there we go. I think that's it for the wiring we can do right now. Now the fan and this are going to connect up, and there's going to be a cable going out here to go to the fan on the motor of the on the lathe. And then there's also going to be a control cable coming in. That's what the that's what this little grommet with 2 cable openings is for. Is for here. The motor lead is going to come in at the bottom here and come up and just connect to these 3 terminals and this ground lug. I've already got the power, and then there's going to be a switch cable that comes in here that comes up and runs the contactor using the controls on the front of the lathe. So I think that is about as far as we can go today. Still need to put a power connector on the other end of this. I won't bother doing this right now. I'll go ahead and do this off camera, and we'll have that ready for next time. Well, that is the electronics enclosure pretty much complete. The next thing we need to do is mount this on the wall next to the lathe and run the cables in from the lathe controls and the motor, and we will do that next time. Until then, if you're enjoying these videos, please give me a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss future videos, and leave me a comment. I'd like to know what you think. Thank you for watching.